In light of all the George Floyd protests going on across the country, I think it's important that we ask the question, what does the Army say about human dignity? You might be surprised the Army says anything about it at all. I mean, you expect the Army to talk about, area defense or reconnaissance operations, and we have regulations on all that stuff. But there is official Army printed, published, produced doctrine on human dignity. And I want to talk about that right now. ADP, Army Doctrine Publication 6-22, published July 2019, Army Leadership in the Profession. Chapter 1, paragraph 61, says this. Army professionals recognize the intrinsic dignity and worth of all people and treat them with respect. So this is just the beginning, and then we'll talk more about what follows. But this is the beginning of the Army's statement on human dignity. And there's two things I want to point out. Number one, the Army talks about human dignity as intrinsic, which means it's baked in, which means it's something that you don't earn and you cannot lose because you're born with it. Dignity is part and essential of being human. Okay, and to me it's based upon the Christian doctrine of the Imago Dei, the image of God. Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, where God says, "Let us make mankind in our image." And so the thumbprint or the image of God is on everyone, and because of that simple fact, everyone has human dignity, which leads to the second observation you can see from the headline above the paragraph, where it says that we recognize the intrinsic dignity and worth of all people, everyone, regardless of their religion, their color, their creed, their political persuasion, the language they speak, whatever. Everyone has dignity. But in the paragraph that follows, the Army does point out, highlight two groups of people. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's very relevant based upon the times that we're in. So see if you can find them. Let's look at this paragraph here. Again, chapter 1, paragraph 61, ADP 6-22. The Army professionals treat all people with respect and Army value, and demonstrate proper consideration for all. Even those who threaten the rights of others are entitled to just treatment according to law, regulation, and the rules of engagement. They lead by example and do what is ethical to prevent abusive treatment of others. They protect those who are threatened or suffer disregard for their human dignity and worth. They do not tolerate mistreatment of people or their property. So that's a mouthful there, and that encapsulates the Army's statement on human dignity. But look at the two groups of people that the Army specifically brings up and points to in this paragraph. Number one, look at the phrase, even those who threaten the rights of others are entitled to just treatment. To summarize, the Army's talking about, is saying, we treat people with dignity even if they don't deserve it. This group of people, who maybe disagree with me or don't like me or hurt me for whatever reason, they still have dignity. They still deserve just treatment. You probably are surprised to know that the Army talks about grace. Somehow, some way, grace, the Christian concept of grace, has made it into Army doctrine, and it's right here in chapter 1, paragraph 61, where the Army says even people who don't deserve it, because of their human dignity, will be treated justly. So think about that in light of the events that are going on in the nation today. But that's not the only group that the Army points out in this paragraph. There's another one as well. The Army says that Army professionals, soldiers, protect those who are threatened or suffer disregard for their human dignity and worth. Let's consider this group now. First, that word protect. That word protect could mean a lot of different things, all the way from we find, it unacceptable, or we do not tolerate, or we pay special attention to, all the way to, we stand up for and with these people, or we fight for and with these people. But what is this group? This group the Army defines as those who suffer disregard for their human dignity. That's a complicated phrase. Those who suffer disregard for their human dignity. But as I'm listening to the message that is being cried out from these protests, led by our black brothers and sisters, this is the message that I'm hearing. That we are, and that we have been, suffering disregard for our human dignity. And so the challenge for me as a soldier is to live out this Army doctrine that says we protect those who suffer disregard for their human dignity and worth. So I invite you to think about that phrase and what we can do to stand next to stand with, to protect those who suffer disregard for their human dignity and worth in these times of June 2020 in the United States. What does it mean to protect those who suffer disregard for their human dignity and worth? Think on that, walk in peace, and have the best day possible.